So, welcome everybody. My name is Brandon James. I'm a digital transformation expert, and you might remember me from the last time I was here talking with our very celebrated guest, Matt Phelan, who it has been an entire year since the HR Top 10 bestseller Freedom to Be Happy, the business case for happiness was released. So, welcome, Matt. Good to see you, buddy.
Thanks for reuniting with me, Brandon. Like we said off air, you turned out to be the star of my book launch, which was great. I was getting loads of people adding me on LinkedIn going, "Oh, this Brandon guy, he needs a TV show. He needs a TV show," is the most common thing that people said.
I am terrified of what that TV show would look like. I have to be honest.
I think we should spend the next 45 minutes exploring that.
Yeah, maybe we could, maybe we could, but unfortunately, I'm not going to let you off that easily. I think people really want to hear a lot more about this journey you've been on for the last year. I've been watching it really closely, and it's been extremely exciting to be a part of it and to watch it all unfold, internationally. So, I mean, I have to ask, what's changed, in the last year in employee happiness during your travels?
Oh, everything, Brandon. I suppose if the pandemic has done one thing, it's meant we've had to explain less why something like employee happiness is important.
Hmm.
Because I think the world of work was quite fixed for a long time, and the pandemic just chucked everything up in the air. And suddenly, when managers couldn't see their team or their team couldn't see their managers face to face, and lots of companies have gone hybrid, virtual, all different forms now, people have started to think, how do we understand more about our people? So I think the biggest change is people not having to explain it, Brandon, which it's a bit weird that the pandemic has brought that. Like, I don't even get that. I mean, what do you think about that?
No, I'd have to agree. I mean, I think people have become more employable since the pandemic, and not because of skill. I think companies are having to recognize that, there's a change that we're all humans, we're all working together, we have feelings. When we all got locked away, I think people started to realize exactly how important the connection of being human really is,
Mm.
and companies had forgotten that quite a bit, and now it seems like it's more about cultural fit, in some instances, than where you went to school, or the right connections that you have. I mean, people want to know they can depend on you and also work with you as well. So, I mean, that's my experience anyway.
Yeah, no, and I think a build on that is the connection point, isn't it? And I think we see that in our data. Like, the number one driver of happiness in every single country is relationships, and it's so important inside work and outside of work. And if we take your original region, we just take North America as an example and compare the USA and Canada. And I love your input on this, actually, Brandon. But the driver of happiness is relationships in every country, number one. It changes from country, but what comes second changes from country to country. So in America, it's clarity of role is number two. In Canada, which, if people are not from North America, they sometimes bundle the two together. Number two is acknowledgement, which is a huge difference, and we see it a lot. And I think we don't know the why of that because we haven't done any deeper analysis. But for me, I think things like the healthcare system in America play a big part on that. Because if I was an employee in America and I knew if I lost my job that my children's healthcare would be impacted, I damn well want to know exactly what you want me to deliver. Like, that'd be right at the top of my list. I'll be every day, Brandon, can you just make sure you clarify exactly what I need to do at this company? Because it's a Maslow hierarchy of needs thing, isn't it? Like, if you're worried about healthcare, that's going to be impacting how you feel. So, don't know if you have any take on that from
I
North
think
America.
your I think your feeling on that is pretty spot on. I mean, growing up in the States, starting my career in the States, it's very much about performance. And you want to be happy, but performance is key. It's a country that it's an at will. Lots of the states are at will, so your employee can dismiss you at any time for virtually any reason.
Wow.
Obviously, there are some parameters, and with that, yeah, you want to know clarity of role because you don't want to be getting it wrong, because someone could say, you know what, bye. And there goes your healthcare, your house, whatever it may be. But also that's an impact on your happiness. It knocks your confidence. You don't want to, I don't think anyone wants to feel that they've been fired because they haven't been able to perform.
Yeah.
And so I can absolutely see that seeping in or driving a lot of that culture. So I think you're spot on there.
And that's been one of the major bits of feedback is, exactly how you talk about performance. And Sean Aker said this well before we saw it in the data, but from the happiness advantage, which is happiness is a precursor to performance. And if the book's done anything, is given data to that philosophy that CEOs need to be looking at happiness for performance, not the other way around. And I think some people just needed the data on it. Like, there's a lot of people out there that's had the instinct that that's the way to do things. But some people are very rational, aren't they? They'll just operate their business in the way that they know works. And until they've seen data on it, they're not going to believe it.
I mean, I think you're absolutely right. So there's something you said that kind of sparked a thought in my head. I remember when I was growing up, I was going to school, as you do as a kid. And we had a janitor, and he would clean the floors. He would whistle. He was just happy. He was just literally a happy guy. I'll never forget that. That was my elementary school, and he knew all the kids, and all the kids knew him, and he was just a nice guy. I always had lots of keys, I remember, all the time. But when I got to high school, it was a lot more people who were very much like, I'm here, almost like a punishment. So they were miserable all the time. You never wanted to interact with them because you weren't sure what they might do to you. Yeah. And I think thinking about what you said, something that maybe someone might not enjoy, like cleaning floors and, sick or whatever it might be, somebody took pride and happiness, and that actually genuinely made them happy in life. And, he always seemed like a happy guy, and everyone always wanted to engage, whereas the other group, not so much. So I think I think you're right. Happiness is a precursor to performance.
In my head, you had a friendly version of groundskeeper Willie from The Simpsons. At your school, Brian, and that's what I've got, the picture I've got in my head now that will never leave me.
No, I don't know. Well, I guess good old groundskeeper Willie. Maybe the version of groundskeeper Willie really did exist at my high school, but that's a whole different conversation for another day. I mean, but one of the things you brought up several times, you talked about some of the research that's come out in your time of while you were writing this book. I mean, what are some of the things that have actually, what kind of new research can you share that has come out since you published the book?
I think the biggest piece of new research that have come out is around, I struggle to say this phrase, but incongruous feelings. So it's where what you're feeling doesn't necessarily match how you think you're supposed to feel. So I'll give you an example from death, which is, say your parent dies, but you feel happy. On the surface, you might be unhappy at yourself because of that feeling. Whereas actually that feeling may be driven by your parent may have been in pain for 10 years and then they may have passed. And then you, from that point, you feel happier because your parent is in less pain. So we've got now more research on incongruous feelings. So the reason that's important in the workplace is because we've been told as employees to block our emotions out and to ignore them, whereas what emotions are really good data sources. Because if you only looked at the surface emotion, I am happy because my parent has died, you might start to think terrible things about yourself. But actually, if you look at it as a data source and you try and understand it as a bigger picture, you might start thinking, right, okay, this is because I can see they're not in pain anymore. And that's an extreme example, but in the workforce, if you're told to not be emotional at work, you may have a boss that's making you feel angry 365 days a week, but you feel it's unprofessional to be angry. So you allow that emotion to come out. Now, you can't confuse the act of maybe getting aggressive with someone because you're angry. But what we're trying to understand is, why does that person make you angry? Are they blocking your freedoms? Are they using passive aggressive terms to you? Do you just need to give them one bit of feedback and then it's gone? Do you know what I mean? Sometimes people, sometimes the most annoying people, and I'll probably include myself in this, sometimes they're doing things that they think are useful, or they're trying to help you, when actually it's doing the opposite. So I think sometimes it's the importance of just chatting and talking about your feelings can help you move forward. But if you just block them out and say they're unprofessional, you're missing out on like huge data sources. And I mean, you're a digital transformation guy, Brandon, you know the importance of bringing in data.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think just listening to that and taking it on board, it's interesting to think. I mean, so I heard everything you said, and there was a small part of my mind, and I'm sure maybe even someone who's watching this is also probably thinking it too. Man, aren't there just some people who are just jerks? And I mean, that has to be part of it too. You know, some people like to just see people squirm. But I do think you're right when you talk about emotion in the workplace, and I'd be interested in seeing how other people feel about this as well. When you talk about emotion in the workplace, when I hear the word emotion, I instantly think anger, sadness. The emotion I don't think of is happiness. If I say someone's being emotional, I don't go, oh, they're being super happy. And that's really interesting to, you know, every time you use the word emotional, it had a negative connotation rather than the, you know, just the fact that there is emotion that exists. It's really interesting.
And our sort of, the way we help clients with that now is to get them to see emotions like the weather. And the reason I think that works pretty well is if you let's take a farmer and let's take a Londoner. So a Londoner finding out there's going to be some rain is like, oh, not again. I'm going to have to pack my umbrella. A farmer that's had drought for 6 months, same rain, thinks, brilliant, got some rain coming. So the reason we do that is we get people to just look at emotions, not as bad or as good, just like the weather report. It's information so you can make better decisions, because if you're that Londoner, it's simple. You pack an umbrella, better decision made. You're not going to get wet. Farmer, brilliant. We might better prepare the fields with this rain coming, or whatever. We can plan to do this. We can move the sheep and so on. So I think our biggest, do you remember that saying that we used to use in digital marketing? If you can measure it, you can manage it.
Absolutely.
So after saying that for years, I now hate that term, Brandon. Hate's a strong word. But now this is not as zippy, and I'll never end up in a textbook for saying this because it just doesn't sound as good. But I would say if you can measure it, you can better understand it. If you can better understand it, you can make a better decision. And it doesn't mean your decision will be right or wrong. It just means you've got more information to better understand it and hedge your decision making towards making a better decision. And again, it's not as snappy, but I think that's now how I see data. It's just helping people make better decisions.
I mean, and so I mean, everything that you're saying, it does make a lot of sense. And it's funny because I've followed this journey since you started it last year, and even a little before, obviously, when you were writing the book. And the more I look at this, it's interesting to me that I keep learning something new every day. I quite like that, the approach you took about measuring data, because it is true, you know, if you can measure it does not mean you can manage it. That is absolute rubbish. I'll use a nice word, obviously, since we're recording this, but it is rubbish. You know, there are things that will be just out of your control, and you're right. There are things that you sometimes just need to know a little bit more so that you can make a decision, not necessarily the right decision, but at least it is progress. I mean, you know, following on from that, and you know how you've helped people. You know, how have you found that people have used the book to make a business case for happiness in their business?
That's a good question, Brandon. I think this is the thing I felt most guilty about in the book, which is when I pulled the whole book together, I realized that everyone's journey is their own journey, right? So I'm not expecting trade descriptions to come after me and sue me for the description of my book, A Business Case for Happiness. But every company and every person needs to make their own business case. So all I could ever do with the book is give you all the evidence and the data and a way of constructing a business case for happiness. I couldn't do that for you. But what I didn't know is how many people were going to sort of take up the mantle and write their own business case. And that, for me, that's the coolest thing, because I probably could have created some kind of like spreadsheet or some like, you know, model, fill out these 7 things and then submit this to your CEO, but it would have been a load of BS. It wouldn't have worked. So what I found fascinating is people have taken their own data, their own stories. Sometimes they become clients of the happiness index, which is cool, but not the main reason for doing it. But they've created their own business case, and they send. Sometimes they send them to me. Sometimes they tell me how badly the meeting's gone, and they prepare for another one. And some people have presented it 5 times to get it over the line with the CEO. But that's just been the coolest thing, how much diversity in the business cases has been, because there's different reasons, and I can never understand what's going on in every business. So just exciting people that this is a. So sadly, quite often from an unhappy place, it will quite often be someone who's working somewhere and they're really unhappy, and they think, right, I can either leave or I can give a crack at changing this place. And I have a lot of admiration for that, because I'm definitely a vote with my feet guy. If I'm honest, like, it's probably partly why I'm an entrepreneur. Like, I can't hang around if it's like that. So actually, I really admire people who go, you know what, I'm gonna stick this out, and I'm gonna change this place. So yeah, a lot of admiration for people doing it, Brandon, is probably my summary.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because I mean, I've seen some of the, some people posted it online. There were a lot of people that really did sign up to it quite quick. And, I was interested to see what kind of change there would be. It's easy, I think, in the mid-level or maybe even senior level to say you want to make a change. But if the change rests with the CEO, and that CEO is maybe too traditional or very close-minded, I could see that being very, very difficult to do. So I do as well applaud people who have taken that mantra on to try and make a change in their business. But naturally, I'm curious how much of that change has happened. I mean, I think a lot of the socio-political, commentary and events that have happened, even in the years since you released, have really changed and shaped the world, and has kind of forced people to have to look at culture. Whether that be from a ethnicity perspective or a, race perspective or gender. It's very interesting to me to see that people have signed up so quickly to make these business cases. I guess I'm most interested in how many of them made them stick. I'd love to hear some of the feel good stories of any of the ones that stick. Any of them stick out in your mind at all?
I think for me, it's, I mean, we've got some amazing customers that are going through that, like, as you know, Brandon, Vivo Barefoot, like, where they just make it standard. Like, there's no even conversation around it. It's just like, this is the way we treat people. This is the way we do it. They're a great example of that. But also Sodexo, 450,000 employees. The founder, I don't want to state his age, but he is older than probably most people listening to this. So, the reason I like Sodexo is it bucks a lot of trends that people think, like, oh, maybe it's just cool young tech companies that can do this. Maybe it's only this sector that can do that. But you've just got a couple of examples there. Vivo Barefoot, like, complete startup, one of the fastest growing retailers in the UK, and one of the 17th biggest employer in the world. I mean, Sodexo report this stuff in their board report now. So it chucks out all the excuses anyone's ever had, like, oh, we're too big, or we've been around too long, or we're not that type of company, or this, that. They've all gone now. So there's no excuses. There's nowhere to hide anymore. Like, treating your people well should just be plan A. It's like there isn't any other plan around it. Just treat people well, and you'll be rewarded in every way, from productivity to sales to share price.
I mean, that is phenomenal, really. Sodexo, I know. I mean, I know how big they are, but it's awesome to see that a company that size can make that amount of change. And obviously, Viva Barefoot, with the rate of growth, it's very easy for companies who are in massive amounts of growth to suddenly throw some things out the window. And it just goes to show that, when you put the people first and their happiness first, that exponential growth is more than not only just achievable, it's sustainable. And that's a really cool story. So thank you for sharing that. I do have a question in my travels that I've been dying to ask you. So I hope
Yeah.
you will oblige. What is organizational neuroscience?
Like, it's a good question. So a lot of people hear us talk about neuroscience all the time, and neuroscience is such a broad field, right?
Yeah.
It's mainly started off by people trying to understand and help in the medical sector. But people like the Happiness Index have seen all this technology and all this understanding of how human bodies work, and we've suddenly applying it into the world of work. So when we're talking about that term, that's what we're talking about. So psychology would have used that term before. And one of the things I found interesting about using neuroscience is, confirmation bias.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I found that at first, some people that have got like very heavy psychology backgrounds have been a little bit intimidated by neuroscience because they think, oh, wait a minute, does that mean everything I've ever studied is wrong? They don't say that, but I can see that in their faces sometimes, and it's going against everything that they've read in the textbook. And what I would say to that is that neuroscience has been built on psychology. It doesn't mean all psychology is wrong, but most psychology in the 1900s was written by privileged white guys. So it's kind of their interpretation with a lot of observation around what the world looks like and how people function. Neuroscience is now allowing us to look at bodies in real time, and we're starting to see how important that information can be when we apply it into stuff like the Happiness Index. So it's a funny old term, but we're helping to get to people to understand the bit of neuroscience that we're pushing forward, and hopefully we're seen as pioneers in that.
It's just every time I think of that, I mean, I know neuroscience, and I thought organizational neuroscience, it's a mouthful. And then somewhere in my mind, I was maybe creating it to be a little bit more than it was. I think your explanation is far simpler than maybe what I came up with in my brain. So thank you at least for giving me that bit of insight. In reading quite a bit of what you've been putting online as well. I know you've been doing a lot of traveling of late,
Yeah.
and I know obviously being a farmer's son, how important, and even the conversations we've had about the natural world, what changes are happening, that we hope that we can influence to make the world a better place. But I am interested in understanding a little bit more. How we do take digital and we try to apply it to the real world in some way, shape, or form. In this sense, I'm thinking more about culture. So I'm thinking organizational culture. Like what could organizational culture learn from the natural world in your eyes?
Yeah, so it's funny you mentioned my dad. If my dad was on here now, he would say, "Don't forget to mention that I was born in Brixton." And the reason I say that is because most people, when you think of a farmer, have a certain view of what a farmer looks like, sounds like, and maybe what they inherited, and so on and so on. So the reason I bring that up is I've learned so much from watching someone that was born in Brixton in the natural world, like just looking at and understanding how animals and plants and everything work. Like I've learned so much from my dad from that perspective. So I've just put that bit in case he's listening, because he's like, make sure you tell everyone. So it's like, so there's that bit. But secondly, like, I'm reading a book at the moment called Wilding by Isabella Plant. It's actually her name, Isabella Plant. I just checked it. I was like, is that her real name? She changed it.
That's perfect.
But we're starting to realize, like, some of the stuff that if you'd said 10 years ago, if you'd said to me 10 years ago that plants talk to each other, I'd have been like, Brandon, how much have you been drinking? I'd be like, what are you talking about? But we're starting to realize that the ecosystems around us can communicate. So to give you an example, in an area of trees, if one tree sees that another tree is struggling, it can redirect resources to that other tree. Wow. So I was like, what? And that was sort of my sort of intro into this stuff. And then you start to get into like the micro stuff. So in just a tablespoon of soil, there's more microorganisms than there is in people in the world. So that's what you're dealing with at that level. And the more and more you delve into this, you realize there is so much in the natural world that I remember me and you having this chat years ago about artificial intelligence and saying that I'll be worried about Terminator 2 when AI gets like 1/1,000,000th as good as plants. And that was before we even knew this stuff. And even in the book, we were talking about at that point around that piece of research that's on the podcast, which is there's bacteria in soil that triggers serotonin in the brain in the same way as the drugs that you'll be prescribed for depression. So I think what we've done is for many reasons, we've created these offices and these spaces that we think are going to be the best thing to put human beings in. But the problem is that is based on a churn perspective, aka put the human being in there, keep them working. When that one falls down, chuck them out and get the next one in. Well, that works when there is an excess of labour. I'm not saying it's a good thing that it works, but companies have got away from that. But we're now in a global shortage of employees. So suddenly the table is turned and people have realised you've got to look at the long term, and you just can't burn out people like this. So the more we look at nature, I think what we're finding is a sustainable way to learn how ecosystems can work, and the office is an ecosystem. So I don't want to go too much into that stuff, because unless you start reading it up a bit, you're thinking, Matt, where have you gone with this? So
I was just going to secretly start Googling. I was going to secretly start Googling you in the background, going, "Oh, how many microorganisms are in a teaspoon?" No, I'm just kidding.
I would, if I was you, anyone is interested in this, go to YouTube after this. Go to Joe Rogan and look up the Mushroom Guy episode. Your mind will be blown. I'll send it to you after this, Brandon. But that's what's starting to uncover. And long story short, the more that's uncovered, the more you realize. So people talk about nature. It's like we're here and nature's over there. It's like we're part of nature too. And we need to be part of nature to thrive, is my summary on that, Brandon.
I think, it's an interesting point, right? Because a lot of us are working from home. We go to offices when we can to connect. But a lot more people will take a meeting while they're walking for the day.
Yeah.
They're out in nature, and that's not something we ever used to do, because we were always so busy. Meeting room to meeting room was really where a lot of us lived our lives, and now that is changing. And I would say my life has definitely been better as a result. So I wholeheartily agree with you, and I'm definitely going to check out the Mushroom Guy episode. Once you send it to me, because that seems
it will blow your mind, Brandon. Honestly, it's so good. You love it.
I mean, all of the you getting to go around the world and bring happiness, and I'm going to call it that, bringing happiness to different countries, different organizations. I mean, how has that felt for you? Has that had any impact in your happiness, like positive or negative? Maybe having to be away a bit more, or having to really always be on the go. How have you coped with that?
Well, I think it's become easier because the rest of my life is more flexible. So and as a parent, Brandon, that something's got to give at some point. Like, you can only juggle so many balls in life, can't you? And it's easier now for me to go away, because I know when I'm back, it's easier for me to work from home. Because I was brought up on the thought, I did used to think that I had to be the first person in the office and the last one out. I was part of that culture because that's what I was taught. But obviously working in the hybrid world for a couple of years makes me I can go to Paris for 2 days, and then that Wednesday morning I'll work from home. Whereas before I would have felt like, right, I've been out of the office for 2 days, I've got to get in. Now I think I need to take my children to school. I can still do the hours, I can still get everything done, because we're working in a flexible way. But and also, once you have a global team, hours go out of the window anyway, because India need me in the morning, South America need me in the afternoon. So ultimately, if you don't get flexible in a global business, you're actually just going to burn out, because you would end up just working different people's time zones. I mean, you must know that with family back home and stuff, Brandon. So yeah, it can be tough to stay connected with people, but if you've got the flexibility, it's fine. I think our sort of marketing tagline that I've sort of, it's not a market, it's more of an observation, which is happiness has no borders. It's like France has been the country I've been focused on recently. We were worried about whether the stuff would translate. You don't. Happiness translates. It's really simple. Like certain things that are hard to explain to another person in another language, but happiness is not. Like if you speak to anyone about the heart, people will get it. They get the fact that if you're not happy at work, you're not going to have the same energy levels. Anyone that's listening to this will be able to think at one point in their career where they were feeling unhappy and not being able to deliver to their full potential, because there's something holding you back in yourself that you may not be aware of. It may be subconscious, but you're not delivering your best.
It's just like we talked about in the book, didn't we? About, that happiness it's shareable, it's super shareable. And that's the thing. I thought about you making all those different journeys and meeting all those people, and even at home, or in your home office, or even in the office. Basically, I felt a little bit jealous, thinking, man, this guy gets to spend an entire day in different time zones being happy with a whole bunch of other people at different times. That's pretty cool in a way. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And that's, it's worth pointing out there. It's being happy and unhappy. And I think that's what builds friendship. Like me and you, Brandon, we've been through happy and unhappy times together. I think our relationship is stronger because we've been through both. If you've only ever been through happy times, who knows whether your friendship will endure, because sometimes first time people go through a tough time, they fall out because they're not the person they thought they were, or they act differently or whatever. So I do feel morally obliged to point out that I'm spending time in other countries being happy and unhappy, and both are cool.
That goes back to the emotion in the workplace thing all over again, doesn't it?
Totally.
I mean, you mentioned unhappiness, and I'm really sorry to do this to you, because we discuss football light touch, obviously, between us, because our teams, mine being Arsenal. We're on a little bit of a roll right now, but but I mean, some would say right now, that Harry Kane is the business case for unhappiness with all the antics that have happened. Is he staying? Is he going? All that. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think he'd be the business case for unhappiness?
I think he's the business case for what we call freedom to be human. Okay. And I spoke to Justin Cochrane, who's the head of academy at Manchester United, about this, which is, I still think in our lifetimes, transfer fees will have to be made illegal, because you're effectively buying and selling a human being. Now, put our what we know about football and how much we love and how crazy this sounds, but ultimately, Harry Kane has been stopped from doing what he wants to do for his career, and there are contracts in place, blah 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 blah, and all this kind of stuff. But ultimately, it has impacted him, and I believe, and I may be biased as a Tottenham fan, I still think Harry Kane is turning up, being as professional as he's ever been, and consciously trying as hard as he can. But deep down, subconsciously, it's impacting his performance. And the example that I would bring up on that, because race comes up a lot in our data as well, advancing racial equity is important. If you think about England through what was called the golden generation, at the centre of that defence was Rio Ferdinand and John Terry, two of the best centre-backs in the world. But actually, John Terry was in a court case against Rio Ferdinand's brother, who John Terry had racially abused, and the footage is there. His defence was, I was just repeating what he said back to him, is what he said. We'll never know whether that's true or not. But deep down, subconsciously, no matter how professional those two players were, which were two of the best centre-backs in the world, they're not really going to be fighting for each other, that tiny little bit that makes a difference. And I think if we just focus on football for 1 second, we'll come off football. I think that because Gareth Southgate's just renewed his contract for 4 years. I think that's what Gareth Southgate has brought to the England team. He's brought the fact that you can be from any background, and you are going to be safe in this environment. I think there are people outside of the team that make players unsafe. We saw that with the free penalty misses. But I think the last bit from football is the fact that there's no professional footballers in the UK that are talking openly about being gay. I think I mean, it's just shocking, isn't it? Like the fact that these guys can't be themselves. It must be deep down, again, because happiness relates to performance. Keeping that massive part of yourself secret, that must be impacting players all across the UK. And we don't know who these players are, but I do feel sadness about that, Brandon.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I mean, even when you look at, Gareth Thomas, when he was retiring, and he felt he could say it then, but then he was so free, afterwards. And my heart broke for him because I thought, man, he was already an awesome player anyway.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, he might have been really awesome if he'd have just been happy to be who he was. So, I think the public or anybody is extraordinarily naive or just willfully ignorant if they believe that you can have that many people in a league and nobody's gay. I mean, it's just, the numbers just stack against them. And I think, sadly, maybe in some instances, they're afraid of people would be very surprised at who is and who isn't. And really, it shouldn't matter. One of my son said something really profound to me the other day. It was very interesting. We're just having a conversation, and I asked him if there were any girls at school that he liked, because that, a dad does that. I mean, a dad doesn't sometimes say, "Are there any boys you like?" But then I said, "Are there any?" He said, "No." I said, "Are there any boys at school you like?" Because I thought, hey, you got to have honest conversations. This is, honestly, be happy in who you are. And he said, actually, no. He's like, no, I think I like girls. And he said, that's where it is. He goes, but I have a friend at school and I think he likes boys. And I said, and does that matter? And he said, no, it doesn't matter. He's like, how you're left-handed? And I said, yeah. And he said, it's kind of like that. It's like he's left-handed. It doesn't matter. It's like, okay, I'm right-handed, he's left-handed. And I thought that's an amazing way to look at the world. I had a nice, like, proud parent moment, because I think the thing is that all any of us want our children to be, or ourselves, is just to be happy. Just be happy in your own skin. And you don't have to, I think, the royal family, the one thing they have done really well is the thing that they always say, never explain. So realistically, if you're happy being yourself, be yourself, I mean, with that, oh, sorry, please.
No, I was going to say, but I get so much inspiration from children. Like my son Fred said, I mean, he's only 4. He said one the other day, but this is way more accidental than your son's, which he literally just went, "Love is love, Dad." I was like, there's no better summary on any of this, is there? Love is love. I was like, what could I say to that? I was like, you're right, man, you're right.
Love is love. I think it's pretty, that little tiny statement is just beautifully profound and makes so much sense. It's sad that not more people can live by that, but I feel like as a world, we're getting better. I think we're waking up to a lot of things, and we have to hope as our kids get older and their generation takes over that, the world will be a better and different place for the next generations that are coming through. So nothing more. I think we're doing it the right way. I realize for me that I have very poorly lit myself for this. I apologize. So I'm like getting brighter in the face as it gets darker outside. But I did want to, I wanted to thank you, very much for including me in this journey, and also for joining me to talk about this. And, it's been amazing to watch this whole year go by, which seems to have flown by. And, how much the book has grown, how many people's lives you've touched. And, I can't say anything more than just keep doing what you're doing and carry on. I hope we're going to see a lot more from you in terms of, books and writing and research, because it's fascinating. Is there anything you'd like to leave people with?
No, the reason I asked you, Brandon, to do this with me today, because I just wanted to keep it low key, just have a chat. And for me, you're the epitome of that relationships piece, which is, I know no matter how much we've chatted or not chatted, that you'll be there you'll be there for me, whatever, and vice versa. And I just feel like if everyone at work can think like that, like they've got their buddies back, then like you don't need to read my book. That's all it's all about, isn't it? That the people around you have got your back, and I just want to say that's my thank you back to you, Brandon.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you very much.
Well, all right.
I guess that then we should wrap this thing up then. Thank you so much, Matt, for sharing the journey with us, and we'll look forward to hearing a lot more from you in the future. Maybe halfway, or maybe next year, for sure.
Yeah, and maybe at some point we'll actually have a book launch and meet up with everyone and in this non-crazy world, and we'll have a little party. But Brandon, thanks for coming on and hosting. If you've read the book, thank you so much. If you've shared the book, even, thank you so much more, because we've had zero marketing budget and people just keep sharing it, and then more people buy it. So Brandon was right. Brandon's quoted in the book by saying happiness is just shareable beast. You didn't say beast, I've just added that on there, but I think that's what seems to be happening. So yeah, thanks, Brandon.
Thank you.